Today, we're diving into the hidden science that keeps these massive ships we see on the ocean from sinking, even when things go catastrophically wrong. And this whole story really kicks off with one single bone-chilling prediction made in the final hours of the Titanic. You probably know this scene from the movie, right? The ship has just hit the iceberg, everything's in chaos, and the captain turns to the one man who might have an answer, the ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, and asks the only question that matters. And the answer he gets back is just terrifyingly precise. There's no guesswork, no maybe, no false hope. The designer just knows with cold, hard, mathematical certainty that his creation is doomed. So you gotta ask yourself, how? How could he possibly know the fate of this supposedly unsinkable ship with such certainty, right down to the hour? Well, the answer has a name: damage stability. It's the entire field of engineering dedicated to designing a ship not just to sail perfectly, but to survive the absolute worst-case scenario, to stay afloat and stable long after its hull has been ripped open. All right, so let's get into it. How do you even start to design a safer ship? Well, the very first big idea, the one that changed everything, was actually pretty simple: subdivision. Just take a look at these two ships. The one on the left, one hole, and it's game over. The whole thing floods. But the ship on the right is different. It's divided up by these strong, watertight walls called bulkheads. Now, if you get a hole, the water is trapped in just one or two of those rooms, and the rest of the ship stays dry and afloat. Now, to make this a standard, measurable thing, designers came up with a critical safety limit called the margin line. You can think of it as an imaginary line in the sand, just 3 inches below the main deck. If the ship gets damaged and sinks so low that this line goes underwater, it's officially considered unsafe. It's the absolute red line you cannot cross. And that margin line is what lets you figure out the next crucial concept: floodable length. This is basically the biggest possible hole you can have, or the longest compartment you can flood, that will bring the ship right down to the margin line, but not a millimeter past it. It's like the ship's safety budget, measured in feet. So then, naval architects take this idea and they map it out for the entire ship. This creates something called a floodable length curve. And here's the really interesting part. The curve isn't a straight line. A ship can actually handle a much longer flooded section in the middle because that just makes it sink down nice and level. But if you flood a section near the bow or the stern, it causes the ship to tilt or trim, which is way more dangerous. So what do you do with this curve? How does it actually make a ship safer in the real world? Well, it's all about designing the ship to meet a specific compartment standard. A one-compartment ship can survive having any single one of its compartments flooded, but a much safer two-compartment ship can survive having any two neighboring compartments flood at the same time. And yep, this brings us right back to the Titanic. This is why they called it unsinkable. For its time, a 4-compartment ship was an absolute marvel of engineering. It could survive almost anything, a collision that flooded 2, 3, even 4 of its compartments. But the iceberg was just the worst possible kind of look. It didn't just punch a hole, it sliced along the side, ripping open 5 separate compartments. And just like that, the brutal math was clear. Thomas Andrews knew it in an instant. So for decades, this system of just counting compartments was the way it was done. It was called the deterministic approach. And it seemed to work until another famous disaster showed everyone that it had a huge, fatal blind spot. Fast forward to 1956. We've got this beautiful Italian passenger liner, the Andrea Doria, which collides with another ship in thick fog. Now, here's the thing. Based on the old rules, she should have been fine. The number of compartments breached was totally within her design limits. She was supposed to survive. But she didn't just sink a little lower in the water. She started to list, to heel over, and she did it fast and hard. So hard, in fact, that half her lifeboats were completely useless, hanging out in the air. She floated for 11 hours, but that crazy, unexpected angle is what doomed her. It was this terrible, slow-motion disaster that proved one thing: just counting compartments wasn't going to cut it anymore. See, that's the big problem with the old deterministic method. It's too simple. It assumed all damage was created equal, and it didn't care how a ship flooded, just how much. It couldn't predict a catastrophic list like the Andrea Doria's. What the industry needed was a whole new way of thinking, a smarter system that, well, played the odds. And that's exactly what happened. The Andrea Doria disaster directly led to the modern system we use today, which is required by SOLAS,
That's the big International Convention for Safety at Sea. And it's a completely different way of thinking, called the probabilistic approach.
So, instead of the old question, how many compartments can we flood, this new approach asks a much, much smarter one. Basically, computers run simulations of thousands of different ways a ship could be damaged. Long gashes, deep punctures, you name it. And for each one, they calculate a survival score. All of that gets boiled down into one final number, the Attained Subdivision Index, or simply A. And if you want to get into the weeds a little bit, which of course we do, here's how that score works. For every single one of those thousands of scenarios, you multiply two things together, P and S. P is the probability. What are the chances of this exact kind of damage happening based on decades of accident data? Then you have S for survival. If that damage does happen, what are the chances the ship stays stable and doesn't just capsize? So you do that calculation for thousands of scenarios, you add up all the scores, and boom, you get your final attained index, or A. And from there, it's a simple pass-fail. Your ship's A score has to be higher than the R score, the required index set by the rules. If A is greater than R, you're good to go. It's a true statistical measure of how resilient a ship is. Okay, so that's all the heavy-duty design work that happens before a ship is even built. But damage stability isn't just a blueprint. It's a living, breathing thing that has to be managed on every single voyage. You know, out in the real world, things get complicated fast. You've got stuff like permeability to think about. I mean, an engine room is jam-packed with equipment, right? So if it floods, there's not as much room for water as in a big empty cargo hold. And then you have the really dangerous one, the free surface effect. This is when you have a tank that's only partially full, and the liquid sloshing around inside can actually make the entire ship way less stable. This is why, before a ship goes anywhere, the chief officer has a really important job. They have to sit down with a special loading computer and punch in everything for that trip. The exact weight of the cargo, how much fuel is in each tank, all of it. They're literally running the numbers to make sure that this specific ship with this specific load on this specific day is safe according to the rules. So, you'd assume this is happening correctly every single time, right? Well, an inspection campaign on oil tankers back in 2010 found something pretty, well, shocking. On 16.2% of the ships they checked, the crew couldn't actually demonstrate that they were in compliance. That's nearly 1 in 6. And that right there tells you everything you need to know. True safety isn't just about smart design on a computer screen. It's a constant partnership between the naval architect's plan and the crew's diligence, day in and day out. Which really leaves us with one big question for the future. As ships get even bigger, as they become more automated, as they start using brand new types of fuel, how is our very definition of safe going to have to evolve again?